Pharaoh's plagues. In my story set, I put all 10 plagues over 2 stories. I deal with the first 7 in what I call Pharaoh's plagues. And I put 8, 9, and 10 in what I call the Passover. For the sake of the insights, I'm going to deal with all 9 plagues at this point, and then I'll deal with the Passover separately. I want to deal with each plagues and give some thoughts about each one. The first one is the water to blood. The Egyptians valued the taste and the quality of the Nile water extremely high. It was just legendary. I mean, they write poems about it. It's just amazing. And then to have it where they can't even drink it, and it stinks. This hit the entire nation of Egypt. But the part that I'm interested in is that when God gives instructions to Moses and Aaron, tells them what to do, he says, walk down to the Nile and wait for Pharaoh to come and walk up to him with the staff in your hand. This intimidated Pharaoh. Remember in the last insights, straw to bricks, I talk about how Aaron's snake ate all the other snakes, that Pharaoh and the magicians and all that watched it, they knew what that meant, that Israel would triumph over the Egyptians. So as Pharaoh saw Moses and he saw Aaron and he saw the staff, he was focused on the staff. Then later on, when Aaron turns and he strikes the Nile, which is one of their major gods, and it bleeds because the staff struck it, turns to blood. Intimidation. The second plague is the frogs. This is the first break in Pharaoh's resolve, and the first of a couple of times that he says, "Oh yeah, you can let the people go." But he's not really negotiating seriously here. He's only being a leader. He's just saying whatever he has to say for the good of the nation. He's not really wanting to go. I find it interesting that when Moses says to him, "When do you want the frogs gone?" he says, "Tomorrow." I don't understand. Does he love his frogs so much he wants to spend one more night with them? There's probably some meaning there that I just don't get. Well, the third plague is lice, and some translations say gnats. This is where the magicians, for the first time, realize these plagues are the hand of God. And among those magicians, according to tradition, are 2 particular ones. We referred to them before. Paul refers to them as Jannes and Jambres. According to tradition, when Moses, just before Moses is born, Pharaoh has a dream. And the magicians, these 2 men right here, interpret the dream, saying that there will be a boy child born in Israel that will destroy the land of Egypt. Now they're old men. They're still a part of this group of soothsayers and magicians. And at this point, with this plague right here, they're realizing, here's Moses. They know his history. They know he was a Hebrew boy, born about that same time, brought up out of the Nile River, adopted into the Pharaoh's family. They were probably opposed to it at the time. Kills someone, rushes off, and now he's back, and looks what's happening. The land's being destroyed. I think this might be the beginning of the turn. Anyway, Paul refers to them in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 8, when he says that they resisted Moses. The fourth plague is flies. What the what the Jewish tradition does is it combines the lice and the flies into the third plague and calls them bugs. That leaves them room to add another plague that we don't have, and that's wild animals. They say that the fourth plague is wild animals who comes into the land and wreaks havoc among the people. But we call it flies. And starting with this one right here, this is where God says that the plague does not go into the land of Goshen. Now, does that mean that the Israelites had to suffer the first three plagues? Or does that simply mean this is the first time it's mentioned that they are exempt from the plagues? I personally I think there's a good chance they had to suffer those first three plagues to see what was going on, and then they were more thankful when they were exempt. Again, the discussion that Pharaoh and Moses are having all is around the 3-day journey to go in the wilderness and to worship. Number 5 is diseased livestock. This killed horses and donkeys and cows and sheep and goats. But Pharaoh saw both sides. He says he got angry, but you have to understand why. His stately, prized, even what he would call divine horses are lying dead. He sends spies into Goshen and sees that Israelites' second-class livestock is still alive while his prized horses are dead, and he gets angry. Well, number 6 is boils. This once again hits the magicians. Also, this plague right here affects more than just one of the Egyptian gods. Actually, several. It could be up to 3 different gods that were affected. But at this point, God talks about the plagues as a whole. And at this point, we see that God understands the plagues to be in 3 different groups. You have the first 6, which we've dealt with, which are plagues with a restrained hand. And then you have the next 3, which is a full hit. And for the first time, Pharaoh seriously starts to negotiate the agreement of letting the people go for 3 days. And then finally, you have the last plague, number 10, which is the final blow. Well, number 7 is the hailstorm mixed with fire. This is also against several gods. The Jewish tradition says that it breaks into 3 areas. There's the deafening thunder. And we think this is probably true because even Pharaoh, when he was saying, take this away, he was saying, get rid of this thunder. It just had to be deafening. Then they said that the lightning would strike and send fireballs that would run across the land. That must have been terrifying. And then the killing hail. And again, the Egyptians are given an option here. Moses tells Pharaoh that tell your people to stay inside, keep the servants and the animals in shelters. And it says some of them did it, others didn't. Wonder if the magicians followed it. That our 2 soothsaying friends probably kept their servants and animals in, and they were protected and were benefited by following Moses as opposed to Pharaoh. If so, this was the first step in them switching sides. The 8th plague was locusts, like no one had ever seen before. But with this one right here, Pharaoh fully realizes what Israel is about to do. They're going to leave and not come back. At this point, he's trying to negotiate so that they won't do that. But he's now realizing what's really involved here. Moses is still talking about a 3-day journey. The other thing to note right here is Pharaoh's by himself now. The advisors are no longer with him. They're saying, hey, you give them whatever they need. Let's just get rid of them. The 9th plague is darkness. And you may think this is the easiest of them all, just being in the dark for 3 days. No. This is among the 3 ones that's a direct hit. This devastated the land. For 3 days, they were in absolute blackness. It says that they could feel it, and they couldn't move. When it says they couldn't move very far. It was like in the prairie during the pioneer days when there was a snowstorm. There would be a whiteout, and people didn't dare go outside because they could get lost, just trying to get to the barn and back. The people couldn't go to work. They couldn't do recreation. They couldn't see friends. They could barely maybe even get food and drink. It just devastated. But I think the interesting thing here that Jewish tradition holds that the Hebrews who had tried to assimilate themselves into the Egyptian culture, that they died during this plague, during the plague of darkness. I find that interesting. Moses is still talking about the 3-day journey, but at this point, Pharaoh knows. He knows what's going to happen. Well, I'm sure that during these plagues that Israel was watching it all and saying, oh, I'm glad it's not us. Glad it's them and not us. But near the end of Moses' life, he talks to them. In Deuteronomy 28, in essence, he's saying, you watched the plagues. You were glad it wasn't you. But understand this. If you depart from God, if you leave him and go your own way, these plagues will, and more, will come on you. And he gives a list in the chapter of all the plagues that God will bring upon his people. One person said it's like a barbed wire fence around a safe space, keeping people from going over a cliff, trying to keep them where it's safe. We just need to realize that the God of compassion, love, redemption, he's also the God of plagues. It's just best to stay as close to him as you can. We'll come back when we give you insights on the Passover as we continue through the stories of Moses.